Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is the Sunday garden question and answer video that I do most Sundays on the channel. You can ask gardening questions down below this video and I'll pick from those next week. And generally I'll pick, I think I've picked 20, 21 from last week's video. I try to do ones that haven't occurred for a little while or are kind of relevant to now or relevant to the person who's in the video with me, because Stephany's in the video for the first time. You guys have seen Stephany in several of the garden tour videos, the weekly garden tour videos, and this is an opportunity to have Stephany answer some questions on here. I didn't put up many videos this week. There was a tour video, probably the last weekly tour video for a while. Probably skip about 3 or 4 weeks before something really changes substantially here in the landscape. But we did shoot a ton of content this week. That video that we shot, that we did with the compact plant video that had 21, 22 compact evergreen shrubs in it. There's another one of those coming, so some additional plants. There are 2 for mid-sized plants. And then there are 2 for larger growing evergreen shrubs, screening plant size material. And then we're doing fall seeding or putting out the vegetable plants in the garden. That'll be a video as well. And we're going to show you all the seed that we have for spring, for annuals and perennials. So Steph's going to give you some of her history in horticulture. Go ahead.
All right. So I think my earliest memories about plants and horticulture came from being the child of my father, who was very much motivated by the garden. And so I spent a lot of time in the garden with him. And then one summer, I was trying to decide what job to get, and I decided I'd work at a garden center called the Rake and Hoe. And after graduating from college, I dropped by to say hello, and they made me stay. And I stayed for 4 or 5 years, met this gentleman right here, and stayed for 4 or 5 years with him as well. We both had our own lives and came back together much longer. Recently.
Yeah.
And in between those times, I went back to school and got a BS in horticulture. And I feel like I've been able to bring that to my time with Jim, and he's been able to bring all his expertise and help me along the way. And then we've met some incredible professionals and gone to awesome gardens, and I just keep learning, which is wonderful.
Yeah, it's a good thing to be doing.
It's great.
It's a great. So the first question from last week, because I said Steph was going to be in the video, so there are a few questions that were specific to you. Do you do residential design? So we're in the Raleigh, North Carolina, central North Carolina, and we call this area the Triangle area. So it's Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, but it's really become Raleigh, Durham, Cary, probably. Do you do residential design?
Yeah. So when I went back for my horticulture degree at NC State, my concentration was in residential landscape design. And so I do have that ability to come to people's landscapes, and depending on their needs of their landscape, I can create a space that should be one that they really enjoy.
Cool. Awesome. All right, so let's get started on some other questions here. Somebody asked for some alternatives to boxwoods in a formal garden. So they wanted to mix a few things together and not have all boxwoods. Anything that comes to your mind?
Well, I always think actual boxwoods, there's some, obviously, a lot of hollies. All our alternatives, like dwarf yaupon or some of the hellery or a touch of gold, if you want to get some variety in color. Also Distilium. It's a little more open form, but it has those smaller leaves, and I think it has the ability to look pretty formal as well.
Yeah, and I would almost throw Sarcococa in that group. That just came to my mind.
Shade.
Yeah, and it's actually in the box family, so it's in the same family with it. If you had some shade, and then the other autolucans come to mind. If you have some a shadier space.
Certainly.
Yeah, there's a lot of alternatives to it. Some of them may take a little more time to become boxed, as opposed, where a boxwood would just kind of volunteer for it a little more.
Certainly,
Or
and
Japanese
sometimes
hollows.
people don't like them with an auto lucan. I don't like to head shear them to make them a box. I like to go in and prune off branches to sort of accentuate a box shape, but not quite be quite so drastic in box shape. That's
Right.
what my preference would be.
And you'd want the flowers too, probably.
Yeah,
You would be cutting the flowers if you were hedging them all the time. Okay, let's see. So I mentioned in last week's video that not many people had watched the bonsai guy's video, and then a lot of you went and watched it or commented down. There were lots of comments where you either went then or had already watched it, and everybody thought it was as great as I thought it was. You thought it was as well. You filmed it.
I filmed it and I was enthralled.
You're right. You're right.
I would go back there right now just to experience it again. It was a wonderful place.
Yeah, it really was. And it's right up the street.
Bonus.
Yeah, so somebody has a bad slope. They're in western North Carolina, and they're bought some of the Slope Master grass mixture that they're going to use on it this fall, and they're going to, cover it in hay. And wanted to know if I had any thoughts on it. That Slope Master grass mixture is, I think it's about 10% white clover, and then it's fescue and some bluegrass. I think it might not be bluegrass, might be something else, but I think it's like 50% fescue and 10% clover. Then 40, maybe it's 40% bluegrass. Fall's the right time to do it. You probably want to do it before you were going to get some light rains and hopefully not have super heavy rains. The other thing that I've used on slopes like that in the past is love grass, and you can actually get the seed for love grass, and that's something that it's a native that will grow well on slopes. It'll actually grow well in a lot of spaces, but what I would do beyond using that Slope Master mix, if you're not planning on maintaining it as a lawn, is you can also seed some native echinaceas or black-eyed Susans or rattlesnake master or anything on it. All of those things would root deep and help you. Grasses being the best. Grasses are definitely, all grasses, just root deep and tend to hold the soil in place. Okay, so somebody asked about Ruby Spice Clethra watering, because the tag on the Ruby Spice Clethra they bought says likes moist conditions.
Yeah, well, there was not that long ago, Jim and I were wandering around in the woods somewhere, and we came across a huge stand of Clethra, and they were very close to the water in boggy conditions. So nature has it that they will tolerate the wet areas, but they'll also tolerate some extremely dry areas. We have them right next to the driveway on sort of a slope. Yeah. And quite honestly, it really didn't take very long for them to acclimate there and do just fine. They're not the plants in this landscape that tell us that they need watering.
No, not at all.
So they're very tolerant.
And there's ground cover phlox right next to them that have near death all the time in that same spot. They
sure are.
They can't get enough water. And then there's another place when we walk the dogs around the block over here where they have them in that wooded space near the road. Yeah. With big trees. It's definitely dry there. Definitely dry shade, actually. So very adaptable native plant. So somebody has a 5-foot tall camellia they bought in Connecticut this year that's in a container. And what do they want to do? What should they do with it during the winter? I think they're going to have to bring it in and out. It's one of those things I would bring it inside when it's cold enough to hurt it, but have it outside as much as you can.
Well, would you bring it in your garage?
Garage, if you have a garage. But yeah, and it has some light. But really, the days you can have it outside, in zone 6A or 6B in Connecticut, you're going to have some warm enough days during the winter to have it outside.
Would you recommend, one time I saw these people had a little, like, one of those things with wheels, and they just wheeled.
Oh, a dolly, yeah.
Right. Well, no, just a little with 4 wheels, and they wheeled it in and out of there. Yeah. I thought that was pretty wonderful.
Right.
Idea.
Yeah. But see, if it's heavy like that, yeah. But I think having it outside some would be beneficial to it. Otherwise, I think you're going to end up overwatering it potentially in too dark of a space, and rot it. Okay, so what is the red-leafed plant or purplish leaf plant behind me when I'm filming these Q&As every week over here?
It's flamingo purple celosia. Yeah. And it's funny, we've had, when people comment or ask questions about the things in the landscape, I mean, it's about all of the plants, but a lot of times it's either the loropetalum,
Yes.
it's the mahogany splendor, the
Yeah.
purple ones in the back,
Purple hibiscus.
or the purple celosia there.
It's always a purple plant. The plant of the year every year is a purple plant.
And what's interesting, I will say about those, they do take over, as do the mahogany splendor.
As does that loropetalum.
Yeah. So next year, I really probably won't use them there, but I might put them where the mahogany splendor hibiscus is.
Just let them get big.
Yeah,
let
no,
them
let
do
them
what they
get
want to
big
get.
because I keep having to cut them back,
Yeah.
and they look gorgeous in their natural shape for certain.
For sure, but that has definitely been the plant of the year. Okay, all right. So somebody in Zone 7A wants to know if they can go ahead and put, they have some calacanthus and a wisteria. They want to know if they could plant it now. Yeah, definitely, anytime. I mean, you can, calacanthus being a native and wisteria being a weed, both of them can go in the ground now. So somebody has a Golden Falls redbud, just like our cousin looking redbud back here, as it's been named. And they planted it back in March, and some of the leaves, when it first leafed out, it had little small leaves, and then later had more normal heart-shaped, large, almost sweet potato vine type size leaves on it. So what do you think is going on there?
I think that the first year or so of a plant being in the ground, you can't really depend on it being its actual more, like, lack of a better word, adult form.
Right.
A lot of times in our Golden Falls, it had smaller leaves the first year.
It did.
And
it didn't hold the color as well the first year.
And
it's held the color much better
now.
this year.
But yeah, that first year, it's not going to be always quite true to itself. It has to get acclimated in its space and to come to its full grandeur.
Yeah, and ours really hasn't flowered. So we've continued to have a problem with ours.
Question that, but
yeah, right. This person said theirs had flowered at least, so you're ahead of us on the flowering. Okay, so then somebody asked had a design question for a narrow space. So they've got a long sidewalk, which I wish builders would put in sidewalks that had curves in them and get them a little further from the house down the driveway a bit, because you end up being left with these 3 foot long, 3 foot wide, 20, 30 foot long strips that are very hard to landscape. So
sure. I actually, quite a long time ago, I had a very long expanse like that, and I think I was right out of school, and it was a really hot space, and I chose a mixture of drought-tolerant plants like rosemary and things like that. I kind of feel like smaller, more narrow plants can work in there. You have to first tell me whether you have sun or shade, if it's wet in that space, if it's dry in that space. There's all sorts of factors, but
yeah, especially on a foundation, you can have all kinds of variables, plus water, potentially water coming off the roof in that spot.
One of my main things when I'm looking at a landscape is trying to contrast different textures and colors. Like if it was a shady one, I might take some green Akuba and place soft caress Mahonia right next to it. If you're familiar with them in all the videos that we've done, or mix in a variegated plant too, to just give a little difference in a long expanse, so it's just not one long
row of soldiers.
Rosemary, like I did in the very beginning.
Right, yeah, or right, because a lot of times you can go to the garden center and find the thing that you're really drawn to that will work there. You can tote it all over the place looking for companion plants for it. So if you find a narrow textured soft caress Mahonia, you might be now seeking out, something that's gold foliage that has a larger shaped leaf or something like that. So it can contrast color. And
then put a Mojo Pittosporum in there for a little variegation. Or, there's all sorts of great things. They get wide, but it's a little wider than that 3 feet. But there's all sorts of great things that you can mix up to make a really beautiful space.
Yeah, but look for different textures, different foliage colors together.
And know what kind of height you're looking for, whether you have low windows or...
Right, yeah, not to block the windows is another thing. Okay, so it's always, should be redbud questions answered by Jim Putnam should really be this channel. Somebody's in zone 7A, got a flamethrower redbud. It's very crispy in the sun. Yeah, it's going to be crispy in the sun. Most of these redbuds will adapt to sunny conditions. My purple foliage redbud at the old house adapted, but it was green by the end of every summer. It wasn't happy. It just said, okay, if I have to. The main problem, redbuds and dogwoods, very specifically, you'll see them along the wood edge. They're poking their foliage out into the sun, so they want sun on the foliage. They just don't want sun on their roots. So if you stick it out in the middle of your lawn, you know, that can be a struggle for them. But it will adapt. It'll get better each year, but it won't carry that color through the whole summer in a full sun spot. Okay, so somebody has a neighbor, their oak tree hangs over their yard and drops tons of oak leaves. That would be similar to the conditions we have back here.
That's exactly right.
What should you do? They're very thick in that area. What should they be? What do you think they should be doing with them?
Well, we have that same exact issue. We have a 3-trunked oak in the back that spits out tons of leaves, and we look at it as free mulch. So it's more than we need in that one spot, but we just move it around and put it in other areas and use that as free mulch. Yeah. If you don't have other spaces, of course, you could dispose of them other ways. Your city might take them or whatever, but we look at it as a resource that we like to keep on site. Other things we could do, we could create new beds by putting the leaves on them.
Yeah, you could put
in
12 inches. Yeah, put 12 inches on some space you're going to turn into a bed in the future.
Yeah.
And just bury the grass.
Use it as a bit of a protection. Some of your marginally hardy shrubs, sort of place them around them so they'll be more protected from the weather. We also look at it just as a plug for nature. We try to make sure we keep those leaves because it creates a habitat for 1 billion positive creatures.
Yeah, and the robins spend all their winter flipping them over. Keeping oaks specifically. And there was actually a question last week about river birches, and I answered it, and then I dropped it. I cut it out of the video just because I didn't like my answer really all that much. But river birches and oaks and many other native trees, but those two specifically are the host for an incredible, diverse group of living things. And I think oaks are host to like 500 different butterflies, moths, the larvae for wasp, non-stinging wasp that are in those trees. They're on the back of those leaves, you know, when they fall off the tree. So if they end up in a garbage bag and headed off to a place to go to a grinder, they're dead. And so, you know, keep that in mind. You know, some of those leaves you can take up because obviously it's too many and grind them up or whatever, but leave some whole leaves in your landscape. And that question last week was about a river birch having, I think it was sawfly larva on there, which is a non-stinging. Those two trees are very important to a lot of native species. So keep that in mind. If you see something doing damage on them, let it happen because they're important. They're important pieces of our environment. So there you go. Let's see. Somebody asked if do gardenias bloom on new growth. So they basically just wanted to know when they could prune them. Yeah, they bloom on new growth. So you can prune them right at the end of winter or right after they flower, which is typically May for us, probably a little earlier if you're a little further south. And if you prune them in the late winter, I would expect them to bloom probably 2 weeks later than they would have otherwise because they've got to kind of reestablish some of that growth. Okay, somebody has a Goshiki osmanthus that they bought in Zone 6, and they are labeled Zone 6 to 9, but what do you think about what they should do with it?
Well, 6A is pretty far up there.
Right.
So I think it would be a really wise idea to put it in a more protective area, maybe in an alcove where two walls meet, sort of maybe not in the actual corner, but you know, somewhere where they're getting a little protection and they're not just getting windswept and kept colder than they probably would like to be kept.
And they probably need to throw a sheet over it.
Yeah,
since they're
every
fall,
once
since
in a
you're,
while.
Since you're fall planting it, you probably need to think about...
Oh, are they fall planting it?
Yeah, well, now, yeah. Yeah, so not the best time
He
to fall
would plant it in the spring.
Yes, yeah. And now I'd plant it in the fall and then tell everybody that this is the reason you plant them in the spring, because I half killed it, like I did the spiderweb fatsia.
No, you didn't kill it.
No, but I mean, planted it in November. I sit here on these videos and go, spring plant marginal things, and then I plant the most marginal thing that's in this landscape in November.
It's beautiful now, though.
It is. It is. It survived. Okay, so somebody asked about wood chips, because we talk about wood chips so much on here, if there's a particular kind of wood. No, whatever you can get, from the chip drop folks, I don't think it matters. And then they were at Lowe's or someplace and saw some pine based horse bedding and wanted to know if they could use that. Yeah, but it's probably, a little more expensive, to do it that way. But if you can just get on like the Chip Drop website and get free wood chips, then I really don't care what kind of wood it is all that much. That, if you're putting it down and then letting it break down for some period of time, it just doesn't matter all that much. It really doesn't. Okay, so somebody had fall planted camellias in Zone 6A last year, and they died or struggled. So what would I think they should have spring planted them, right?
First off.
Right. Yeah, and then I think they had gotten ones that were supposed to be 6B hardy. The Ackerman hybrids, which we have in that mid-size, was it the mid-size video? One of the videos we shot the other day, we had one of the Ackermans.
Snow something.
Yeah, autumn snowman or...
Yeah, something like that.
The Camellia Forest in Chapel Hill, you can go on their website, and I think he has most of the Ackerman hybrids available for you can order directly from them, or at least get the names of them and some good description of them. But there are Zone 6 camellias. They're interspecies hybrids. So there's several different types of camellias blended together, but they're considered the most cold hardy. But again, you still want to spring plant them. You'd still want them not to be out in the direct wind. Okay, do we have any night lighting in the garden?
Not really. We do have a couple solar lights right at the entry of the walkway in the front, but we are blessed or cursed. I think cursed, because I would prefer less light. We have one of those giant city lights, light poles right in the front there, so it never gets very dark in our house unless we black curtain it.
Yeah, it's way too much light out there.
It's too much. It shouldn't be. I like to see the stars, and well, that's not going to happen.
No, not here. It's not. Okay, so somebody has wanted to talk about the north side of their house. They're in Georgia, and so those of us in the south, the sun actually goes north of us during the peak of the summer. So the north side of our house for about 6 weeks absolutely cooks, and I mean really cooks. And then the rest of the year it doesn't see the light of day because the sun's south of us, just like it is for most folks in the north all year long. And so there is a period of time where your shade space becomes hell on earth, at the worst time of year. And so I've always answered this question with use natives. The native plants, like whether it be Yopon hollies or the clethra like we talked about earlier, or just literally calicarpa, all of those plants are going to be incredibly adaptable to changes that you have in the landscape over time. That area is also going to be wetter in the winter and super, super dry potentially in the summer. So I lean on natives in tricky places. They tend to do pretty well for you. They also will reproduce themselves a little bit, so they can become a little weedy as well, but lean on natives. Okay, and then somebody asked, the last question we'll do for this question and answer, are Encore azaleas more lacebug resistant? And the reason they asked this is because they got some Encore azaleas that don't have lace bugs on one side of their property, and then they have some very old azaleas that do. What do you think's going on there?
Well, one of the things that you've always said is that if a plant is having an issue with insects of some sort, it isn't exactly maybe healthy. They're seeing an opportunity. Those insects are seeing an opportunity. So perhaps those more old-fashioned azaleas are declining in some sort of way, or not as happy where they are, as opposed to the encores. Take a little more sun. Maybe they're in more sun. They're in optimal situations, so they're thriving a little more. So they're more resistant to being succumbing from insect damage.
Yeah, absolutely. And no, they're not more resistant or less resistant. All evergreen azaleas are, we'll get lace bugs. Also, the possibility of wind movement, of air movement too.
Oh, that's
sometimes,
true.
yeah. If the other ones are tucked up against the house, it gives those insects. Even if both of them were stressed, one in open space is probably going to have less. But that's likely what's going on there. Is one's stressed and one's not. Not because one is more resistant and one's not. So. Thank you very much for watching Question and Answer and following along with the channel. And thank you, Stephany, for...
Thank you for including me.
Yes.
It was great fun.
Awesome. Ask questions down below for next week's video. Thanks for watching.